primates, to the Press Monkey Radio Show, where truth, activism, and bananas is our goal. Also now with justinform.com. Justinform, for responsible activism and journalism, please join us at justinform.com. When you're tired of your data being stolen, manipulated, sold, justinform.com. So by the time you folks hear this, it'll actually be November 11th rather than November 10th, and we're going to give you a post-election discussion, a little post-election wrap-up here at Press Monkey, and we also have a special guest joining us, and we'll find out who that is as soon as we come back. And we're back with the Press Monkey Radio Show. Please join us at pressmonkeymedia.com. Also, join us at justinform.com. And come check out our Facebook page, both Press Monkey Media and Press Monkey Independent Media, where truth, activism, and bananas is our goal. Again, we can't actually bring you folks any bananas. I want to remind you that that's not something that we can do. The bananas are metaphorical bananas, and the potassium that we're trying to bring you is the potassium of truth. So bear that in mind. And as I mentioned before, we've got a very special guest. A full disclosure, about this guest. I know this guest very, very well. This guest is actually my original editor here on Press Monkey Media. Also, she's my significant other, the mother of my children, and the love of my life. Frankly, I'm not the truth bringer that I am without her. She's also a strong truth bringer, keeps me honest about my truth bringing, and I'm so pleased to bring her on the show today. And when you get a chance here, I'd like everybody to take a moment and remember, we're going to try to introduce many segments with Izzy. Izzy, Izzy's last name is Wright. We're going to call her she was the right woman for me. I had to wait for the right woman, and she's the right person for this particular segment as well. Her name isn't Micheli yet, though she's been with me for 7 years now and has given me 2 wonderful and very intelligent, very creative and inspiring young boys. And so I'm very happy to finally have her on the show, because she's really been a big supporter of the show. She's helped me with my website a lot. She's been my editor and really my confidant behind everything that Press Monkey has done and is about. So I couldn't be happier to introduce you all to Izzy. I'm not sure if she's going to be going by Izzy Wright or Izzy Micheli. Who knows what we're going to make her into, but we're going to make her into something soon, and but not a monkey, because we're all pretty much already that, right? So here on the Press Monkey radio show, we're going to bring you some truth, activism, and bananas, and we're going to do a post-election breakdown, and Izzy and I are going to sit and discuss some of this stuff. So please give everybody a little hand to Izzy and welcome her to the show. Welcome to the show, Izzy. You know, this has been a long time coming. Thank you for finally joining me, and thank you for dinner. It was delicious.
It's good to be here finally. We recently had midterm elections. Everybody knows. I guess we're going to talk a little bit about what the results were.
That's right. And the results are in. I guess the Democrats retook the House of Representatives, as was predicted, but it was less of a blue wave as they had predicted, and more of a kind of a squirt gun against oncoming elephant. What do you think about that?
I've got weird elephant and squirt gun imagery in my head now, but the Democrats did take back the House. They do not have control of the Senate here in Colorado.
Well, I believe that they do have control of the Senate here in Colorado now. From the best of my understanding, is that not correct? I thought that they took control of the entire Colorado government, as was unpredicted, actually, here in Colorado. And most people thought that Jared Polis would swing his election.
No, that's not correct, actually. The Republicans won the Senate with 51 seats versus 46 to the Democrats.
I see. Okay. So, I mentioned on the show a couple times that Jared Polis was the third wealthiest, actually the third wealthiest U.S. senator in the House of Representatives. I've also mentioned that the job itself doesn't pay more than $90,000 a year, and he has donated almost $20,000 to his his
$20 million.
His successful campaign. Yes, $20 million. Thank you. But aside from that, yeah, there's a lot of different little bittersweet defeats that we had. The the Proposition 112, that which would have caused a 2,500-foot setback for the oil and gas industry, was one of the things that many of the candidates, including Jared Polis, was much involved in, and that measure was defeated. What's your take on that?
Proposition 112, like you said, would have required just 2,500-foot setback from residences, which to me, that's not asking for much. But Democrats would not support the measure. Republicans wouldn't support the measure, and you had the biggest spenders putting a lot of their advertising money against that measure. So here in Colorado, it's just become a dangerous place to live in terms of public health and safety.
Well, I know that's also true for the local candidate for the commissioner, Paula Stepp, who was up against Tom Jankowski here in Garfield County. She had a hard time distancing herself specifically from that particular issue. In fact, what she had said, essentially in her interview and her assessment during the debates, was that she was to take a nuanced view and a nuanced approach because she understood the need for jobs and what have you. It was my understanding that when we went to the polls that a nuanced view was not actually one of the choices available. It was yes or no. Was that on your ballot? Was there a nuanced view on your ballot?
That's not really a thing.
And that's the introduction of a new segment for Izzy as well. Izzy has been kicking around the idea of a new segment to introduce here on Press Monkey called That's Not a Thing. We've got a lot of different ideas for it. It's quite a hilarious concept. We definitely are going to pursue the idea in the future, I think.
You can take a nuanced view on an issue, but when you're talking about a ballot proposition, that's for or against. That's when a candidate can't even say how they're going to vote on a proposition that's on the ballot right now. So that was pretty pathetic. There was also really nothing better I can say about those candidates. This is a weird election cycle to be discussing because there was so little to support.
That's true. That's definitely true. It's definitely. I didn't find very many candidates that were suitable for me to vote for. Locally, Bob Rankin, actually, another Republican, retained his seat, another incumbent here in the Roaring Fork Valley and in Garfield County. And it seems like that it's been a trend here in our locale, though it seems statewide there seemed to be an actual tugging back and forth between the two corporate parties anyhow. It seems like there's also a lack of representation for progressives here in the state of Colorado. What do you think about that? Well, maybe we'll come back to that one. More importantly, besides the Proposition 112, I believe that 111, which was a very important proposition, the one talking about limiting the percentage rate for payday lenders and things like that here in Colorado, that actually passed. What's your take on that?
I was in favor of that. I voted for it myself. I do think that it doesn't go far enough in limiting those kind of predatory lending agencies, but they've put very similar restrictions in effect in other locales around the country, and putting some kind of limit on how much they can squeeze out of people, deliberately giving loans to people when they desperately need extra money and are in a situation where they're very likely to have difficulty paying it back. And then there being no limit on how much they can charge people was crazy.
So you think payday lenders target poor people?
I know that they do.
There's no argument there. So what about speaking of targeting? Well, this is more of targeting rich people. It seemed. I don't know what the take on it really. Another local ballot issue that came up was I believe Amendment 74, which was a protectionary. They were billing it as a protectionary measure for landowners. What was your take on that? Did you vote on that issue?
Of course I did. I voted against 74. Luckily, my fellow voters had the good sense to do so also. Just a terrible, terrible idea. What was obvious, I think, to Colorado voters is that they did not want the repercussions of taxpayer money going to anyone who has a gripe about their property value going down. That's just a preposterous notion. They tried to sell a bill of goods to people, and this did work for getting it on the ballot and getting people to sign a petition. But they tried to sell a bill of goods that the government was just building roads right through people's yards and then not paying them enough money to be able to go buy another house.
Well, now I heard it described in a local, or actually the Denver Post in an article. I heard it described as the measure was actually something that was actually a trick for the Colorado people. The Colorado people, in fact, support property rights is what the article was trying to suggest. Now, my take on that is kind of that most people here in the state of Colorado are not, in fact, property owners. Most of us are renters, and we are less sympathetic to that point of view and position than the real estate economy, the real estate banks, and especially private property owners would have you believe.
Well, they were trying to have people think that property owner and homeowner were the same thing. And there are a lot of people here who are homeowners or aspiring homeowners. It didn't work. I think people realized that this did not apply to most of them. It was kind of a scary measure if it did pass, because it looked like it was about, property owners' greed on the one hand and taxpayers not wanting to get exploited on the other. But they were really using this to scare people against any regulation against harmful business practices.
What do you suppose is the difference between a property owner and like a private property owner and a personal property owner? Is there a difference?
Technically, the terminology there isn't clear, but there is a difference in the type of property owner that we're talking about. People who own property for their own use, people who own property for business use, and people who own property to own property and make a profit off that are three completely different categories, I think. And the legislation in our state that applies to them is very different. And they often want to lump people who are worried about their interests in owning their own homes with things that are really meant for the industry, or banks or real estate companies or wealthy individuals who own large amounts of property that they turn a profit off of when other people need it, rather than for their own. Even business use is a separate third category, that I think small business owners don't understand sometimes. And in this case, they did. People saw that, no, this isn't for us.
It seemed to me
this is for the energy industry.
It seemed to me that 74 was setting itself up, or setting property owners up in general to try to capitalize off of a presumed land value, like the presumed land value that they might get if they decided to maybe lease their land to, say, an oil and gas industry, that they don't have the same required setbacks now for.
I also think it may be another case here of that is rich people's problem. Remember the whole inheritance issue that they tried to make a big deal about? But voters were lukewarm one way or the other because only people inheriting extremely large amounts of money were impacted by those rules anyway. And again, if you're trying to make sure that you can buy a home for your family, this doesn't impact you. Them trying to make sure that nothing negatively impacts their property values only makes it harder for those of us not only wanting to rent a home, but buy a home or start a small business. So, the people of Colorado, for whatever reason, were looking out for their own interests and saw through this one.
So, Izzy, I noticed that you actually have a little bit more of a in-depth analysis of the Colorado elections, especially in the House of Representatives and state legislature. Can you highlight some of what might be being overlooked?
I don't know about overlooked. I can give you a basic summary because I pretty much looked at the official statistics and haven't analyzed it too deeply yet. But I did notice that, like you said, it wasn't really any kind of a blue wave, wasn't any kind of a red storm, or any of those other kind of goofball slang bullshit things the establishment cheerleaders were talking about.
Such language. Kidding, of course. And we here on Press Monkey, of course, truth activism and bananas sometimes requires the truth requires coarse language on occasion. So we're fully supportive of that. Of course, I'm joking. Continue, please continue. I'm sorry.
But it was a pretty. I noticed that the slight majority held right now by the Democrats in the House is similar percentage-wise to the slight majority the GOP is holding in the Senate.
Has Jared Polis's exit of the U.S. Senate or U.S. House of Representatives affected that margin much, do you think?
I think that's quite possible, actually. We're talking they lost 2 seats, needed to gain 2. So that's a net 4 loss. So I don't think his seat was a huge turning point in that. Because they really kind of bombed in their Senate campaigns overall. In Polis's district, I do think it lost them 1 of those. But again, they still lost 2 when they needed to gain 2.
Well, how about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who became the actually youngest woman I hear to have entered the U.S. Senate. What do you think about that? Do you think that helps the Democrats be able to set any policy or any tone of policy with the Republicans in the Senate or the president?
I don't think it matters, and let me elaborate on why I'm saying that. I don't think that they have any desire to work on any of the kind of policies that she would want to push. Her individual platform, getting elected to her seat in her district, and the Democratic Party's will to do things don't match up. I think the current nauseating tone of Nancy Pelosi wanting to buddy up and work with Donald Trump and the GOP is more indicative of what we can expect in policy. I've said it's frightening when they work together, and I know that the Democrats may like getting some popularity and likability points for having any progressive still holding the D, but I don't think that there's any will there to use it to do anything.
So you feel like that maybe she is kind of a lone voice there in that chamber, maybe a little less effective than some of her champions might be trying to make her seem.
Yes, and through no fault of her own. She still has her chance to show what decisions she'll make, how she'll vote on things, what will she push for. Um, but the Democratic Party is no ally of progressive ideas, and they're definitely no ally of forwarding progressive policy. I don't think that it matters in our state or the nation much at this point if the Democrats or the Republicans are in power, because they're all working toward the same ends most of the time. It's not like the Democrats would stop the Trump administration's worst actions if they could. It's not like if they had just had their blue wave, then all these things would be happening differently. They wouldn't try to get things done for us, and they wouldn't stop things being done against us. It's not a lack of majority. It's a lack of will. And the Democrats are the Democrats.
That's true enough. They all seem to be working a lot of times in tandem with Donald Trump. In fact, Donald Trump seems really all too willing to reach out to people like Nancy Pelosi after her reelection. They all seem a little too willing to work together for people who are supposed to be in opposition to one another. How do you think this kind of bodes for the supposed Russiagate conflation that's been happening? The Russiagate, I don't know what else to call it, but except for that I've heard a couple different people, including Jill Stein and Ron Placone, call it the new neo-McCarthyism movement. What's your take on that? What do you think that this all bodes for? That do you think that they'll be able to press that issue any more effectively with having the U.S. House?
I want to say no, but if I'm totally honest with myself, I really want it to be true that enough is enough with this. I do think that it's finally becoming just less and less possible for the American people to swallow this weakly woven paranoid narrative.
Now, I heard one of our heroes here on the show, Jimmy Dore, say coin a couple times, and I'm not sure if he coined this himself or had said it, gotten it from somebody else, but I've heard him say several times that the Democrats, if they had run on universal health care, if they had run on a living wage, if they had run on actual platform ideas like that, universal health care, a living wage, forgiving college debt, things like that, things that could matter and make a difference to the majority of American people, that would have swept them into office. Do you think that that's true? Do you think that would have made the difference? And do you think that might have been just more hollow platitudes from an establishment party that's overly entrenched with corporate money and power?
I think it certainly would have been more hollow platitudes because the donors wouldn't have changed, and it probably requires its own discussion, but you know my feelings about the Democratic Party as an entity. So if they are who they are, why would they do those things? And I don't know that it would even have worked. I don't know that America's that gullible after the bad taste they left in everyone's mouth in 2016. Would we really buy? We'd be like, well, how are you being funded by who you're funded by if you're going to make things like a $15 an hour wage happen? I'm not sure if Jimmy was right about that, just because I know I wouldn't have bought those things coming from them. I'd be like, no, you're not going to do that. You're just trying to trick me into voting for you.
Is Alexandria Cortez the next Bernie Sanders? Meaning, not only in terms of her rhetoric, her very familiar rhetoric that she shares with Bernie Sanders about many well-held progressive ideas, but also in terms of, do you think that she might be a sort of false messiah for the Democratic Party and may end up being a sheepdog for that very establishment that we so desperately need to break away from?
Remains to be seen. I don't think she was as independent and outside of the establishment to begin with, and so there's more of a chance of her moving away from it. Whereas Bernie was supposed to be an independent and became anything but. Hers would be either the opposite story, or she'll go all, blue loyalist on us. But it remains to be seen, and I would give her a chance to prove herself now that she's actually in her position.
Well, very well. That sounds all about right to me. And we're gonna conclude that part of the Press Monkey Radio Show, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the second installment of Press Monkey Media Radio, and our second installment on the 11th of November here in Colorado. Coming back, he wanted to reintroduce Izzy. We're here with Izzy still. How you doing, Izzy?
Good. It's good to be here.
No, it's certainly good to have you. As I mentioned before, Izzy is actually the original editor of Press Monkey. I gave her the title because she's done most of the work in helping me bring you the truth, activism, and bananas. She's done a lot of work on my articles, a lot of work helping to refine my understanding and arguments of the current situations of the day as we swing from activist place to activist place and swing from source to source to try to bring you the truth and activism and bananas that you, our followers, deserve. So, Izzy, I want to preface this part of the report with a little piece of news and something that happened. We're talking recently about Alexandria Cortez and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her election. It was recently reported that she also is having difficulty finding an apartment situation there in Washington, D.C. It said the apartments and for rent there are very, very expensive. I don't know very much about that. What's your take on that?
I think that it really highlights the inequality problem in America in a new way. It's something that in our personal lives, between gentrification, inflated real estate costs, stagnating wages, affordable housing is a serious problem for more and more working class Americans. But when we talk about having a pay-to-play system, it's keeping citizen participation in the government out. Obviously, in getting media attention, there's an unfair advantage when it comes to who has money. Campaign finance rules not being effective in stopping corporations from controlling election coverage. But it goes a lot deeper than that. I think it goes back to the basic sociology of being able to participate in society and people in lower income classes being left out of that. If someone who's elected to office can't afford to live where their elected office is on the pay of that office, what does that mean?
Well, that's definitely true. We've discussed this before, and as you know, I've brought up on the show a lot about income inequality regarding housing specifically, and I give you specific credit for helping me refine that idea into what we now coin as the Residents' Bill of Rights. When I was calling it what was I calling that before? I was calling it the Renters' Bill of Rights is what I was thinking before, but you helped me refine that concept a little bit better. I think that it also highlights the need for more protections of all of us, not just people who are public servants, but all of us when it comes to renting and being consumers of the product of real estate and rental properties. What do you think?
Well, I mean, if if they control where we live, they control what we can and cannot do. They control what we have access to. You can see that if they price us out of living where schools can afford good teachers. You can see that disadvantage. But this highlights how impossible it really is to have a government by and for the people if you don't have access to the basic things that people need.
I coined the phrase luxury gentrification some time ago, and I've lived out here, as you know, for 28 years, actually, this December. You've lived out, how long have you lived out here now, altogether, in this area, in the Roaring Fork Valley, close to Aspen, Colorado?
I've lived here for 8 years altogether. I moved here nine years ago.
Now, in your estimation, is that a thing? Is luxury gentrification a thing?
It is. And it's not terribly different from other types of working class access to housing problems that you see. But it's definitely a specific phenomenon in markets like
fans
this.
of the show know that I'm actually from Indiana. But where are you from originally, Milo? I know this. I just want to actually introduce you a little bit more to the audience. So we're going to give a little bit more background.
It's a bit of a gypsy background, honestly, as far as where I'm from. My childhood and adulthood have been split up a bunch of different places. I was born in Dallas, Texas, but was fortunate enough to not stay there for too long. A few years later, I was on the East Coast and lived in New Jersey, and then was moved back and forth between Ohio, and then lived in New Jersey again and North Carolina, and then traveled around a lot after that in my young adult years as well.
Now, to followers, after Izzy and I met, I fell in love, and we had our children not too long after that. I got her pregnant, and we moved to Ohio to stay with her mother while we had our firstborn child. Ohio is a very, as most people know, as most of the followers of Press Monkey probably know, is very politically active and significant across the board. Even in this day and age, what was your take on political activity while you were there in Ohio?
During which time period?
Well, I guess more specifically, during your more formative years that you had spent there, or did you spend most of those in New Jersey?
When I became politically aware was when I was living in Ohio, actually. As a teenager, I ended up drawn to the Green Party very early on. I was unusual for the people around me in that I was really, really frustrated that I couldn't vote in in the election because I was just a couple months shy of turning 18 in 2000. I turned 18 in December, and so I was trying to get as many people as possible excited about the Green Party. And then in parts of my state, you might not have even had Ralph Nader on the ballot, even if some annoying 17-year-old got you to vote for him.
Now, I'm slightly older than you, so I remember very specifically after George Bush became elected president and we were about to go into war. How old were you when that happened, and what was your feeling of that situation back then? I mean, because it's pretty well recognized that the media helped manufacture consent for us to go ahead and invade the pretense to invade Iraq to begin with, and then many countries after that was established there. What was your take on that as a kid, or was that something that was a little above the board for you?
No, that was actually my early college years. I was really involved in the anti-war protest movement at that time. Actually, um, we were involved in organizing a group of people who went and joined up with a larger group representing solidarity with the big New York protest of the Republican National Convention under George Bush and that big anti-war protest. Um, I was, like I said, I was attending community college at the time. I was about 20 years old, I think. So that was
About 18 or 20. That sounds about right. Um, well, I Ohio, of course, is famous for a lot of political activity and happenings and things like that, but that's not the focus of a lot of our cast right now. A lot of our cast has been more shenanigans down in Florida. Evidently, the evidently there's been a lot of different situations that have happened down in Florida that have been called into question whether or not there's going to be an actual legitimate election of their representatives down there. It seems like they're having they're having issues with the credibility and reliability of their election systems these days. Is that something that you would say is a fair assessment?
um, that's a fair assessment, I would say, but there's there's quite a history of election problems in Florida. I'm a little overwhelmed with the level of election fraud problems
I
in that
mean,
state right
I mean,
now.
arguably, a lot of people say that Florida was the linchpin of uh, Al Gore's election, or lack of election, rather. Would you say that that's also a fair assessment? I mean, and Florida has been seemingly a thorn in the side of almost every other election in some form or another, but most recently, there's been just many reported issues in this particular election of malfeasance down there. Uh, is it worth it? Is Florida become a political liability?
I'm not gonna go there. They're still Americans, so I'm not gonna.
Fair enough, fair enough. I'm just, I'm just saying, it's a little crazy. So I was just asking. Uh,
If if we accomplish comprehensive election reform, as I've talked about, and listeners, if you're still with us, look for me to bring that up in the more in-depth topic of discussion in future casts. If we had comprehensive election reform, I would just say we would make sure that Florida was not immune to any of those measures. Um,
yeah, I can agree with that. Okay, well, I guess we'll look forward to the next political happening and see what unfolds there before our next report. I'm not really sure how else to finish this report. Is there anything that you think that is being left out recently that we should probably be talking about? I mean, obviously, other than all the things that are being missed by mainstream media, like the atrocities that are being helped committed in Yemen and in Syria and um, other in Africa and places in Africa and other places in the Middle East. Other than all those things,
those things and a lot more. We've barely scratched the surface. So I would just say everybody look for more to come. Some articles coming your way.
articles. Well, it sounds good to me. You're a great writer and a great editor. You've helped refine my work for sure. So we'll look forward to some articles as well, and hopefully we'll get the get your little segment kicked off. The That's Not a Thing. It sounds really fun to me, and thank you for joining me on this episode specifically, and getting broken in on the show. We'll look forward to seeing more or hearing more of Izzy, and I'll look forward to seeing more of her. We'll put her on a live cast with an actual video one of these days soon, though. So, but we'll look forward to hearing more from Izzy, and look forward to giving you folks some more truth activism and bananas. You have anything to finish off with?
Join us on justinform.com. That's JUST, the letter N, FORM.com. And check out pressmonkeymedia.com.